Jeremy, good afternoon. How are you, brother?
I'm doing well, Alex. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I appreciate you coming on, man. You are the type of people I like whose lives they don't follow linear tracks. Like you don't know what's going to happen next. So I'm interested to hear kind of how you got to where you are right now, and I'd love to go back to the beginning and hear about life in the call center and all that. But maybe you just quickly tell people who you are and what you've been up to over the last little bit.
Yeah, I'm Jeremy Johnston. I am a serial entrepreneur now. Have worked in a lot of different industries, but in 2017, my dad passed away, left me a little bit of money. And I decided I wanted to find a way and figure out a way to own a business. That took me from the call center world where I spent most of my life to going to work for a LED gas price manufacturing company with the opportunity to hopefully purchase into that company. It didn't happen, so I found a flooring company to purchase in February of 2020, right in time for COVID. Went through a fire and lawsuits and all the fun stuff, and purchased a second store last year. Kind of here we are today. So
After fire and lawsuits and COVID, you were just dumb enough to do it again, right?
yeah, absolutely. I figured if I'd survived that I needed to double down.
Well, I definitely want to talk about call center stuff, but okay, so your father passes away. Were you of the opinion previous to that, like, I'm gonna start a business, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur? Not to
You
date
know,
you already joked with me dating yourself previous to this, but, you're not 25 years old and like, "Hey, I got my whole life ahead of me, I'm ready to become an entrepreneur."
Yeah, I mean, so it's weird. So I guess going back a little bit further, I was born in Texas. I've lived all over. So prior to moving to Ohio, I'd never lived anywhere longer than 7 years.
Mm.
So as my dad was going through and getting his PhD in Christian education and whatnot, and senior year of my in high school, spring break, my dad sat me and my sister down and said, "Hey, just wanted to let you know I'm gay." Came out of the closet in '97, which was not common, especially as a Baptist ordained.
I was gonna
Uh,
say, that's a little bit of a curveball.
yeah, yeah, and he's like, "You got to help me. You're gonna spend your spring break helping me move out." And I'm like, "I don't know."
Sorry to interrupt and ask, but was that a
Yeah,
split parents? Was that a split between parents also at the same time?
it was. Yep. So my parents also split at that point in time, and I had kind of seen it coming a little bit. That there was something going on, but yeah, at that point, my parents split. It was, I guess, good timing from nobody else was going to be in the house after a few months.
Mm,
With
yeah.
my sister was older and had moved on, and I was graduating. So at that point, I kind of uh, didn't know what to do because I had thought that I was going to become a preacher.
Interesting. And
Yeah,
did
and so
that,
that's
like,
what
deter you? That just was like, "Oh, okay."
it did because of the response of the people within the organization,
I
right? So like, I went and talked to my youth pastor and all this, and I was expecting for it to be, Jesus loves everybody, et cetera. And it was like, your dad's going to hell, you
Oh, no. I mean,
like
that was '97. Isn't it crazy, like, how fast things change, though?
it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And
There's
and
some of that. Let's not act like there's none of that, but
no, but it's not like it was back then, right?
yeah.
Like, I mean, like my grandfather was sending my dad letters about camps that he could go to make him straight, right?
Yeah, pray away gay, man.
Yeah, I mean, at 48, I'm sure the first thing my dad wanted to do is,
Yeah.
come out of the closet and,
Yeah.
but
I don't mean to chuckle at it, but yeah.
no, but it's just funny, like the thought that somebody be like, "Hey, at 48, he just wanted to go have fun," like, and
Yeah, right.
be condemned and lose his job, and all
Family, break the
yeah,
family
yeah,
up.
yeah, absolutely. But at that point, I kind of like spiraled a little bit, and didn't try to cope through alcohol and other things as I went to college, and I went to Texas Tech, and started my undergrad and all of that, and then I turned 21 and got a 0.00, and
That's impressive.
yeah, yeah, it was. I actually went to have an argument with one of my professors because my average on his test was 95%. And he said, "You got the grade you earned, and not the grade. You got the grade you deserved, not the grade you earned." He's like, when you showed up to class, you were sleeping, and when you didn't show up very often. And I said to him that he obviously didn't stimulate my brain well enough to.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's not a good call on my part. Uh,
Yeah.
but
It
so
it
that,
it it probably that's like when you break up with a girl and she starts, You piece of I always hate it." You're like, "Oh, it's
yeah,
a decision." That professor's like, "Alright, I made the right decision."
yeah, exactly. So at that point, I had to figure out what to do. So I got a job in a call center and started selling caller ID, and all of that, wonderful stuff. And it's funny to even talk about that, right? Because paying for caller ID seems completely foreign now. Um, but back then it was new and fresh, and paying for voicemail, and
So
and
were you selling, like, the little boxes that would
we
show you?
were.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then
Yep.
did someone have to, like, come and hook that up, or could you hook that up yourself?
No, you could pretty much hook it up yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did that, and I ended up finishing my undergrad in 6.5 years, but kind of moved up the ranks in the call center business and began running it. And after college, um, ended up staying in and going to work for a smaller entrepreneurial company in Colorado and Denver, selling a even better technology called the postage machine, where businesses would have this machine, and it would, you put 500 letters in it, and it would bulk, mark the mail for them. And we were selling that.
I never even heard of this.
Yeah. So Pitney Bowes, I don't know if you've,
I know Pitney Bowes, certainly. They own
yeah,
eBay.
yeah. So they used to make postage machines that would postmark, um, and cancel all of the mail, that came in. So I went and managed the call center for these guys downtown Denver on the 17th floor. Perfect place for a guy who was enjoying the bottle, and at one point, I realized then that there was something to business ownership, right? Because I'm working for these guys. I'm 24 at the time. They're like 32, have already exited one call center business, right?
Mm.
And have this. They've got this amazing space on the 17th floor downtown, unobstructed view of the mountains. Got floor seats to the Denver Nuggets games. Got a place in Aspen. The whole nine, right? And so I did that for about a year and a half. Helped them to open up another call center a little bit further north. But at one point, I woke up at a stoplight in downtown Denver
Mm.
about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, "What am I doing?" You know. And I said to myself at that point in time, I said, "I need to move somewhere wholesome, more wholesome. More like back to my roots and my values that I was raised in." Right.
Mhm.
And in my mind, I go, "Where was Jack Nicholas from?"
It's right around
Uh,
the corner, baby.
Exactly. So through craziness, I ended up actually interviewing to go run a call center in Panama for my old client from Pitney Bowes. It was managing that site, and the whole time I'm like, I don't speak Spanish. What am I doing? But
Was it in
through,
Panama you were gonna go? 'Cause
in Panama.
that seems less wholesome, Jeremy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it was in Cologne, Panama, so on the Caribbean side, right?
Yep, dog, it's not sounding any less wholesome or
Yeah,
more like Dublin, Ohio.
right. But the company was headquartered in Dublin,
Alright, there's
and
the connection.
yeah, so through that relationship, she's like, "Hey, I can't hire you to run the call center in Panama because you don't speak Spanish." I'm like, "Well, we knew that before I came down, but thank you
Yeah.
for the free trip to Panama."
Oh, nice.
And she's like, "But I do have a client services role in Dublin." So I interviewed, got that job. It was actually managing the relationship with Pitney Bowes for that company.
Mm.
So I went from one company selling Pitney Bowes and managing the call center to managing the client relationship. Well, I didn't know it at the time, but I went to go work for the company that the owners I worked for in Denver had exited.
Oh, small world.
Small world. The owner of that company, as we're sitting at dinner with the Pitney Bowes clients, and the Pitney Bowes client goes, "Hey, how do you feel about Jeremy hiring Jeremy from working for Brent?" And the owner looks at me. This is probably week one, and he goes, "I didn't know where he was coming from, and if I had known, I wouldn't have hired him. I
Ooh.
don't see him lasting more than 90 days." As I'm like eating a steak, going like, did I just like move all the way across the country for this? So that was in 2006.
What was making him say that?
He just didn't care for the way that the transaction ended up going. and they were competitors on that account, and a few other ones. So there was some bad blood.
Mm.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when transactions happen, people sometimes don't feel like, people sometimes feel like they got taken advantage of, I guess.
I see.
But ended up staying there for you know 12 years. So he was wrong. He actually left the company before I did.
Hey.
And he ended up selling to a company out of Hong Kong. But the company really pivoted, in that between 2006 going through the 2008 recession, from more of a sales organization to a customer service organization.
Mm.
So I was there to help kind of usher in that transition from clients like Mutual of Omaha and Pitney Bowes to Apple and Airbnb, and some more sexy names. OfferUp was one of our clients at one point as well.
Mm.
And managing when I left, I was managing North American operations and client services. So all the client relationships rolled up to me as well. So I'd have to go over to Manila, Philippines sometimes, and Panama, and got to take one trip to Hong Kong, which was very interesting.
Mm. What was life like in a call center?
Extremely stressful, especially outsourced customer service, because clients are paying a certain amount of money, and then that trickles down to overhead, and then management fees, and the telephone service, and all of that stuff, down to what you can actually pay the front line. And companies that you're outsourcing to are constantly want to have the best, which they're paying for, right? But you know the turnover tends to be extremely high,
Yeah.
um, because you have these entry level people who are, employees who are wanting to leave for 25 cents, 50 cents, and it's harder to make a living wage, right? So that was um, part of it. And I think when my dad passed away, so in 2017, I actually, um, my wife and I lost our second child. He was born not breathing in April, and then in November of that year, my dad passed away. So I lost a son and a father in 2017.
Mm.
Um, so I think that opened my eyes up to, like, if I'm gonna do something, now's the time to do it. Like, life is too short. Like, you're never guaranteed tomorrow. I felt the need to impact the world and impact people in a positive way. I
Mm.
have worked for a number of companies, and even in the call center business, like, people end up being numbers, and I feel like, as an employer now, it's my responsibility to take care of my team, right? Like, their livelihood and their success is my responsibility. I need to give them the tools, etc., but I need to pay them a wage that they can, live at, right? Pay for, pay for 100% of their health care, as well as pay for retirement as well. So, I think that I want to grow something that my exit plan eventually is to exit it to my employees.
Mhm.
I want to be able to really change the trajectory of my employees' lives for the next generation behind them. It's a challenge, and I saw it when my dad passed away. Of, like, here's my opportunity, right? So I can either go buy a truck, and then a rental property or vacation home, or I can take that money and bet on myself and figure out a way to, build an asset that's going to, help pay for my retirement, and change my kids, the trajectory of their lives as well. Uh,
I think that story is so fantastic. And I meet so many business owners, especially on this podcast, who say something quite similar. And unfortunately, there's a really, like, negative view out there of, like, capitalism. It's like, capitalism is the problem with society. And I would just turn them to someone like you. I'd be like, all right, well, explain Jeremy to me. Jeremy could have bought a rental property that would create no jobs. Sure, someone can go live in there, but that's not really changing their lives. They're going to find somewhere to live, and they're going to go probably rent from a huge developer instead. So he decided to buy a business, and now he has, I'm not sure how many employees. I know you said before starting 7 at one location, 11 at another. Is that
Yeah,
what?
it's a total of 11 direct employees, and then all of our installers are subs.
Yeah.
So when you factor them in, it's 30 plus
Yeah.
probably.
All right. So let's say, anywhere between 10 and 30 people who you're directly impacting the lives of. And then if someone, well, what about his customers? It's like, all right, well, what about him? Like, he's not forcing them to buy anything from him. Like, if they
Yeah,
choose to walk in and buy something, great. If they walk out and say, I can go get this cheaper at Home Depot, it's like, all right, do it. Like, no one's forcing you to buy from me. Like,
yep.
how is this not like a win, like a net win for society all around?
Yeah, I think what I've noticed too is a lot of business owners tend to, you said capitalism. I think that a lot of business owners tend and lean more towards libertarianism, where they feel like it's their responsibility to impact their scope in every way that they can, right? Like,
Mhm.
if there's any way that I can do something to help someone else, it's my responsibility to do that, right? Um, that doesn't mean that it's like, an unlimited checkbook or, anything like that, but it's, I'm going to do everything that I can to improve the lives of everybody that I can. And if everybody just did that, it'd be amazing what we could do. And it'd be amazing what society could be. And we'd probably look more like we did in, 1890 than we do today, as far as like taking care of our neighbors, right? And,
Mhm.
the amount of taxes that people have to pay. And, we'd actually have innovation and, infrastructure that we could count on.
Yeah, what's the joke? Like, we went to war over, like, a 3% tax or something. The American Revolution was over, like, 3% or 5% or something, and
Yeah.
now, you and me pay probably upwards of 40 plus state at, 5 plus local at 2, and it's like, "Oh, Jesus, this is crazy."
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
well, that's amazing. So once your father passes away, I know you
Yep.
said that you decided, like, "Hey, something has to happen."
Yep.
Had you previously been thinking, like, "I'm gonna start a business," or is it
I mean,
just
I had
something like
always,
a bolt of lightning?
yeah, I mean, it was more a bolt of lightning. There had been some of that, but it was always like scary, right? Like my wife is a educator, right? So she at the time was teaching at a charter school in inner city Columbus. And I'm making six figures, right? And we have a mortgage and we have a daughter, and we have bills. And it was like, in order for me to go and start a business with no income and go from six figures to nothing, it's scary. One, and I don't think I could have sold my wife on it.
Mhm.
You know, but when I am going out and saying, okay, I'm going to buy a business. And, at first I was, initially going to go into partnership with another um, couple of guys on a business they already owned to help them scale it. Um, that's less scary. Um,
Yeah.
and then ultimately, when I purchased my company, I purchased it through an SBA loan. I purchased a business that's been around since 1978, as long as I've been alive, right? And the failure rate on starting a business, I think, is what, 80% in the first 5 years or something like that.
Yeah, I was just looking at these stats actually because we are about to hit 10 years. So this September will be 10 years. And it's like corny, but we're making our summer apparel. And I was like, maybe I can like put these stats on, all these reasons why we shouldn't have made it to 10 years. I decided not to. But yeah, those stats every single like year essentially that you go on, more people drop out, but your risk doesn't drop to zero by any means.
Oh, yeah. But then the risk of the SBA failure rate, right? Like the percentage of acquisitions that are made through SBA funding is like 2% or something like that, right? So it's much less risky to do that. And I was like, okay, let me figure this out. And unfortunately, I read buy then build towards the end of my acquisition instead of at the beginning. I kind of did it in reverse.
Buy
But
then
if anybody's
build.
looking, buy then build, yep, by
Um,
Walker Diebler, I believe is his name.
I don't know
Uh,
about this one, but I should check it out.
yeah, it's a really good book about what I call
How
aquapreneurship.
ac
So
ac Yeah, how acquisition entrepreneurs outsmart the startup game. Good old Walker Diebler. Interesting. No, I've
yeah,
never heard of this.
yeah, no, it's a really good read. And it's very, technical. I would say it's a good like college book, on like textbook on what to do. And basically says get your team together, right? Get your acquisition team together, your CPA, your lawyer, broker, etc. I bought my business through bizbuysell.com,
Yep, yep.
which the book will actually tell you is the worst place to buy business.
Uh,
Um, because most businesses, by the time they get to that point, the brokers have approached every single person who's out there looking to acquire a business. It's gone through all of these people who have said no, to the point that they're like, okay, let's list it on the internet.
mm.
Um,
Yeah, it's kinda like if your business was that attractive, people would have been calling you. Like, not to say our business is great, but at least once a week, I get either a call or an email from someone about acquisition. It's just like it's real rudimentary for them. They go through the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies in America list, and they see
yeah,
us, and they go, "Oh, I'm gonna shoot that person an email." So we just get a bunch of them.
yeah, but so it's not a very good place to buy it, but found this company. A woman in her late 70s was running the business from South Carolina. So I figured if she could do it from South Carolina, then I could probably um, do it as well from being right here and
Yep,
being here every day,
yep,
right?
unless she was a phenomenal, remote owner.
Right. Yes, correct. Um, so we ended up doing that transaction. It closed February 14th of 2020, which is an important date, um,
Yes.
because I purchased it via a stock purchase, which the book also says don't ever do.
Can you just go back because
Yeah.
let's go back because I know you said you did the SBA loan, and
Yes.
I kind of follow what you mean by that because I've spent 2 hours talking with Emmett, our mutual friend.
Yeah.
Um, Talk to me about how you structure this loan so that maybe someone else out there listening could start to get the wheels turning like, "Oh, shoot, I didn't even know that thing sort of existed."
Yeah. No, good point. So SBA, the Small Business Administration, has loan programs that you can basically put 10% down and then finance the rest.
So a
Um,
$1,000,000 loan, you can put 100 grand down. So
exactly what I did.
yeah,
Yep.
da
That's exactly
dad
what I
dad passes away, leaves you a little bit of money, like you said, you could buy a truck and a house, but 100 grand can get you it can buy you $1,000,000 worth of stuff for 100 grand right now.
correct. Yep. And the business I bought also came with a 3-acre property that had 2 warehouses and a showroom on it.
Dang, nice.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's not zoned correctly, but that's a story for another time.
Yeah.
But the SBA also likes to see seller financing as part of their transactions, so that the seller has skin in the game of the success of that business.
So the seller of the business, instead of just taking, like, all the cash off the table and walking away, they'll
Yep.
hold the loan, actually,
They'll hold a portion of the loan. So like
a portion.
so the seller in our case financed, I think the seller financed $80,000 of it, right? I put down 100,000, and then the SBA and US Bank financed the other 820,000.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
So
Um,
essentially that 80,000, you're gonna trickle money back to them almost like just basically like you would pay to a bank, like your mortgage, essentially. You're gonna pay
correct.
some of that back to the seller.
Absolutely. But it also helps, it ended up helping me because I financed the business, or I purchased the business through a stock sale. So you can buy the stock of the business, but you take on all of the risks associated with that business. Okay.
So you're buying like the LLC, you're buying everything essentially there.
Correct. Yep.
Instead
Absolutely.
of just buying like the trade name and the, what's the term I'm looking for here?
Intellectual property,
Yeah,
and
like buying the IP, yeah, all that stuff.
yeah, and and the inventory, and buying it all, based on assets, and the rest going to Goodwill.
Yeah, the famous story about that is Monsanto. Monsanto was purchased, and they were saying, "Don't buy Monsanto. Don't do it. It's a stupid deal." And they said, "No, we're going to buy Monsanto." And they purchased Monsanto, and they got all these lawsuits. I got a book right there, Country Capitalism, from my friend Barto Elmore, and he detailed this in depth on my podcast. But first, I heard him on JRE, and now Monsanto's value of that company, excuse me, the company that bought them, who I'm drawing
Carhartt,
them.
maybe?
No, I don't think so. The company's value that was, Bayer is who bought them, like Bayer aspirin.
Yeah,
Um, the value of Bayer is less than they paid for Monsanto now because of all the lawsuits associated with Monsanto. So
exactly, and that's exactly why you don't do it, right?
correct, yeah. Because then,
Um,
like, let's say, well, construction's one thing, right? Because I sold a construction business, minor transaction, but the person who purchased it goes, "Well, what happens with all these warranties? Like, you've
yep,
warranted all this business in the past." So we just kinda said, like, "Your jobs, you warranty. My jobs, I warranty. If it's somebody else's job, a third party, then we'll split the warranty cost." And
and
that's how we did it.
that's basically how we handled that piece. But we said that anything that was warrantied by her, we would take off of the seller's note,
That, yeah, exactly what, yeah,
right?
exactly what we
But
did.
then what ended up happening was, there were 4 or 5 potential lawsuits that she indemnified me from, right? So she said, if these actually happen, I'll cover them because I knew about them.
Jeremy, I gotta ask, man, 4 or 5, that's kind of a lot.
But I just wanted to, from my standpoint, I want to make sure everything is spelled out and covered
Smart,
in
yeah,
case, right? And a lot, 60% of the business that I bought was selling and installing flooring at Red Roof Inns nationwide, right?
okay.
And so there were claims that were made against the manufacturer that she disclosed because I needed to know about them. And in case the manufacturer didn't cover them, she would.
So, essentially, like, someone made it's all flooring, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep.
There's a floor material that doesn't last as long as it's alleged to last, starts to peel up. We've
Correct.
we've installed 1,000,000 square feet of this. If we
Yep.
have to go in and rip this up and replace it, and
Yep.
the manufacturer doesn't cover the cost, and Red Roof and or other any large client says,
Yep.
"You guys are paying for this or we're suing you,"
Yep. Exactly.
then you have to do it out of pocket, essentially. You're covering
Exactly.
yourself for that.
Correct. Yep. Um, but there was one job that she knew about that she didn't disclose. And so I put that transaction took place in February of 2020. She passed away in December of 2020.
Oh, man.
Beginning
This is like a crazy couple of years, brother.
It was, yeah, because we also had the fire in the warehouse in October of 2020
Yeah.
that burnt that to the ground.
You still haven't gotten to the C word yet either.
Yes. So then, like February or March, I have a guy who shows up at my doorstep, literally there when I pull in the morning, and he's like, "Hey, I'm here to get the flooring." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Well, we have this job up here, and there was spray paint sprayed on the floor that's coming up through the material. And Sally, the prior owner, said that she would give us the material for free and we would cover the labor on it." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know who you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. And if you want to take it, I'm charging you." Right. Because this is also like 7 o'clock in the morning and like 5 dudes are standing over me waiting on me to cut the material. Yeah. And, so anyway, um, next thing I know, the owner of some senior living facilities in the area is like calling me up and saying, "Hey, we've got this issue at this retirement facility where somebody spray painted on the floor and it's bleeding up through the sheet vinyl, and your company installed it and didn't tell us about it. So you needed to have fixed that before you installed it, blah blah blah." So file an insurance claim against, it doesn't work. He sues me. And because I bought them via stock purchase, I'm on the hook.
Mm,
Well, thank God I had emails that I had found from her, basically showing that she knew about it.
did she what was the, like, context of the email?
The context of the email was actually her telling the owner, "Hey, somebody spray painted on the floors. We cleaned it up in one
Oh,
unit, and we cleaned it up in one unit, but you need to have somebody take care of it in the rest of them. It's not our responsibility." Right?
nice. That's fortunate. That goes amongst the fortunate emails that you find.
It does, but then later on in the email chain, she agrees to give him the material for free,
Mm,
and if he covers the labor.
and was she not at a position to make that, agreement at that point? Or
No, she could have, which is fine, but she
she
never
she
just.
did own the business at that
Yeah,
time.
she did own the business at that time, but she never
Okay.
told me about it.
That you
Right.
owed somebody all this free material.
Correct. And then at that point, I'd made the owner mad by even charging him for it in the first place. So he sues me for $400,000.
That's a lot of material.
Yeah. It was a little excessive. Um, so before it went to court or anything, I tried to settle with him for the amount of money that she still owed me on the seller's note.
Mm,
To which he said no. We ended up going to. He ended up filing the suit, and we ended up like saying, "Hey, our contract states that arbitrage is first, blah blah blah." And then before it went too much further, he finally agreed to settle for what I owed her. So I pay him.
yeah, it wipes your note
He
out to
wipes my
her.
note away.
That's a
He
bum
actually
that's sort not to say that it's not her fault, but that's a bummer to her because she's expecting, I'm
her
actually get paid for this business and a good
her,
amount of the value is wiped out.
her estate was, yes, because at that point she had
Oh,
passed
that's right.
away.
Well,
Yeah.
not
So
to say that it's still not sad all in all, but
no, no, yeah. But it ends up that that owner of that facility appreciated the way that I handled everything, and stepped up, and we are doing a multi-million-dollar project for him right now.
that's about the best possible way that a lawsuit can end. Because
It is, yes.
I've been involved in those, and normally at the end of it, it's just, like, on site, like, if I see that person, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but fuck that person.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely, 100%. So
Yeah, for anybody listening who has never been involved in a lawsuit, it is not like what you see in the movies. It's not like, Tom Cruise yelling at the guy who's in the jury box. Like, it is brutal. It is. I just had a guy on who was a divorcee, and he was just detailing like it's just terrible divorce. Like, he's like, I thought about taking my own life. I'm like, I totally understand how that could be going on
it's so weird
over
because
a
it gets so
long
emotional,
process.
right? Like, I mean, I remember there were times where I like came in and I lost my cool with my staff, at some points throughout the process. Like, I'm like, I'm going to lose the company, blah, 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 all this stuff. And it's like looking back on it, I'm like, that was a gross, overreaction. But at the time, it feels completely real, right? It feels like somebody is going to steal things from you and take things away from you. So yeah, it's brutal for sure.
Yeah. Well, for anybody listening there, that's lesson number 1. Try not to get involved on, the receiving end of a lawsuit, but I think twice before you push a lawsuit forward, because really the only people that usually end up winning is lawyers.
Absolutely, 100%. That's exactly like that's what I was like. We ended up settling for the exact amount that I had originally offered him, right?
But after
So
another 20 or 30 grand in lawyers' fees.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah,
I'll just tell one quick story. There's a company that owes us $7,500, like unequivocal. They owe us $7,500. They have a signed agreement that outlines the payment terms, and it says right in there, like, Mixed will get paid attorney's fees on this, which is very finicky in the state of Ohio. You probably know that. Um, but we're talking to our lawyers, like, so what do we do? And they're like, well, the next step is like you sue because they're not responding to your letters or anything like that. They're like, it's just a big enough amount that you can't get that in small claims courts. So you got to go to like the big boy courts. But there's a good to fair chance you're going to spend $7,500 with us before you actually get that money. And then even if we win, we don't know if we'll ever be able to actually get the payment from them because
yep,
they're in another state, they're in Texas. There's weird rules about like what can you do, what can't you do. So we're in this ridiculous position where it's like,
just
do we
walk
want to
away.
like, yeah, do we just want to like risk it that we'll end up spending 10 to collect nothing? Spend 10, great, we collect 75. Or do we just say like, well, these people just got away with it, sort of like they just were able to steal $7,500 from us and not. And the craziest thing, Jeremy, I cannot make this up. I saw this guy at an expo like 2 months ago, and like he like saw me, I saw him, and he stopped and was like, "Hey, that's so crazy seeing you here." And I was like, "It's an industry expo. It's not that crazy at all.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
we're one of the larger companies in the industry. We're not that cool or anything, but we're large enough that we're going to go to these expos."
Yeah.
And right away I was like, "So, I just got to ask you about the $7,500 that you owe us." We argue for like 10 minutes just standing there. And then he goes, "You know what? Okay, I'll do it. I'll pay." Shakes my hand.
That's when you whip out your Square and you say, "I'll take a credit card right now."
No, so literally, I email my CFO and I'm like, "Please just send him the invoice right now. Just send it right now." He sends it. That was like 2 months ago. Just like back to crickets. And I'm like, "Why would you just tell me you're going to pay the invoice while
So
you're
everybody
just
watching y'all could hear him say that.
what?" Yeah, my brother was there. He's also my COO. Like the guy's wife was right there, who's also a partner in the business. I was just like, just don't say that if you're not going to pay me. Just like flip me off and say, "Screw you. I'm never going to pay this." I would have felt better about that. But why lie to me again? Like you've already lied to
Yeah,
me once. Why lie again? What was the point in that?
who
Uh,
knows? Yeah.
yeah. Neither here nor there. But yeah, the court system, man, it's tough. Just getting involved in those lawsuits. So
It is. I mean, and basically the reason I purchased like the company via stock was because they had net operating losses. So they had
you were going to be able to take the tax losses on future years.
correct, but the reason they had those was they had sued a former employee for basically bringing customers in and then selling work on the side.
Okay.
So they had a $350,000 win in a lawsuit, but then the guy just files bankruptcy, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it just becomes an unrealized. You're not going to get the money, so that's where the net operating losses came from. But
It's again one of those blood from a stone type situations.
yeah, yep, exactly. So, but yeah, that was the only reason I purchased the company via stock was to get those net operating losses and offset future tax.
Well, hindsight being 2020, now you know, kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So the idea to buy the business was mostly because your wife was like, "No, we can't do a startup."
It
But
was just way less risk, right?
yeah.
Way less risk, and two, we didn't have to have the startup capital, right? We didn't have to, we didn't have to worry about, running through savings in 6 months or, whatever the case might be and having that standing over us. So,
Interesting. What about the industry that you got into? Talk to me about that because it seems like you were just looking, and if you would have had a trash business, you would have gotten into the trash business.
yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, I was an architecture major for a little while in college, for a couple of years. And I've always been kind of handy. But at the end of the day, I'm like, business is about people and relationships,
Hmm.
and the rest can be figured out, right? It can be learned, which is somewhat naive looking back. But I was, flooring is fairly straightforward, I thought in my mind, and I was wrong. But it was an opportunity that I saw that I was like, let me jump in here and take advantage of this. I like the fact that majority of the business had been for Red Roof for 40 years. And
Mm.
that was probably not, the best either at that point in time, but it is what it is. But then COVID was a blessing in disguise for two reasons. I mean, one, that hospitality business went away like that.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
On like no hotel is spending money to replace floors in
yeah,
2020,
right.
right? I
They don't
mean,
know if they're gonna have a business, next couple of months.
right, correct. And then I had sent all of my employees home with pay, and I stepped in, sold the business to customers. We go into the customers' homes and measure and so forth. My warehouse guy would come in the evenings for a couple of hours and cut everything, and then I would help get our installers out in the morning. So it really forced me to learn the business very quickly, and really basically run the company by myself for 4 or 5 months, to which ended up really helping me from a learning curve perspective in the flooring business.
That's fascinating. So what was your idea when you came in, and how do you pitch to these employees? Like, "Hey, guys, like, not only have I never owned a business before, I've never owned anything in the flooring industry, and, you
Yeah, it's
know,
funny too
at least I'll
because
be here."
yeah. I mean, it's funny too because the prior owner and her broker, which was not Emmett, it was another broker, were like not making up stories, but like telling these employees completely wrong things, like about
Oh,
me. Like they told them that I owned a gas that I own an LED company, prior, all this stuff. But, I came in and we had agreed and, close like a month after I left my prior company at the beginning of January.
Mhm.
So there was about a month where I wasn't working and I didn't own the company, but I would come in a couple of times a week to kind of learn it, and start to have the conversations with the employees. I think that one of the employees, the office manager, had moved to California to be closer to her kids, and the other two basically employees, had been here for a while, and they were like, "I just want to stick it out," and ultimately, I think they wanted to see what I was going to be like before they made any decision on what to do. And then I came in and was like, hey, I want to help you have a better life, right? I
Mhm.
want, I'm focused on how I can help you, versus the other, the prior owner had more of a capitalistic view, I guess, in some ways of like, you know, I'm going to be in Hilton Head, you take care of things while I'm here, et cetera. So I think just me being more hands on, me within a month saying, look, it's COVID. We don't know what the heck is going on. Go home. I'm going to pay you, right? Help me, as you can from home as we kind of work through this and figure it out. I think that all allow for them to see my heart and what type of a person I am, and
Mhm.
it really helped them to see that I was investing in the company and not just trying to take money out.
Mm. It's almost a blessing that you came in when you came in because you sort of got the chance to show everyone, like, "This is how I'm gonna react when things get difficult."
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, same thing when I had the fire, right?
Yeah,
Like,
what was the story on the fire? I just had a fire guy on my podcast, so
oh
I
yeah,
know a thing or 2 about fires now.
yeah. So I was at home with a sick daughter, and my wife had COVID, and she was upstairs, and so we were downstairs, kind of camping out. It was in October of 2020, and like I have cameras, so I have a warehouse, and then I had a like sort of warehouse attached to my showroom, and I had cameras, and I was getting alerts, like just alert, alert, alert. I'm like, what in
Mhm.
the world is going on? None of my employees called me, right?
Mm.
Because they're like, oh, he's at home with a sick kid. I don't want to bother him. And I like pull up my camera and I'm like looking at my building burning to the ground. And I'm like, that's not good. What do I do? And I'm like, tell my wife, I'm like, hey, my building's burning to the ground. She's like, what do you mean? So I like send her a screenshot of the firemen running around outside of the building. So I call my office manager. I'm like, hey, what's going on?
Hey, how's the afternoon going?
Yeah, yeah. And she's like, holy shit, the place is burning to the ground. And actually, one of our competitors she's like, one of our competitors is here filming this. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Um,
Don't
but
don't
I'm like,
don't know what to do with that piece of info right now, but we're gonna table
no,
that.
yeah, I'm like, first of all, is everybody okay? Right? Like that's the main point, right? Like, is everybody okay? And and I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna come. I'll be on my way in a second. So I like yell at my wife. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go deal with this. And like I come and like it's a big fire, right? Like when a flooring store warehouse catches on fire. So it was a electric spark from the fuse box,
Mm.
sparked, landed on carpet pad, which is basically just petroleum,
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So
That's one of the things my fire guy told me is everything's made out of, like, these petroleum-based couches, carpets, everything.
yep,
He actually said that things are way more flammable now than they used to be, which I was surprised by.
yeah, that didn't surprise me really at all. But so the pad catches on fire, smokes. I'm literally across the state route from the fire department, like literally. And so they're over pretty quick. But like when I get off of 70, the road's blocked off. Yeah. And I'm like, I own the place. And they're like, okay. So I pull up and the stuff's still smoldering. It's a completely steel building,
Mm.
but it got so hot that the whole roof caved in.
Oh, geez. This a serious fire.
It's a serious fire. Yeah. Yeah. Like I get there and I'm like, I count like 45 firemen and like 10 trucks. Right. Um, and like I'm like walking around talking to these people. My employees were like, like just big eyes. Like, I'm like, okay, stick around and see if they need to ask any questions, I guess,
Yeah, right.
like, but, and, the crazy part too is like all of our internet and phone lines went through that building before they came over to the other building. And, it's such weird things that you don't think about, but, ultimately it was determined there was no foul play. You see, an installer, one of my installers get some stuff out of the warehouse, and then one of my employees like walks out, and then like 5 or 10 minutes later, you see smoke coming out. Then you see the fire chief over there, and like immediately,
Mm,
and it just once that stuff caught fire, it was no stopping it really, you know. But it was a blessing in disguise. A month before that, I switched insurance companies. Uh,
mm,
and my insurance agent, Greg Wilson at State Farm, is great. He advised me to get replacement value insurance, versus cash value, I think is the other option.
yep, yep.
So,
ACV, RCV, I used to that was used to be what we did.
yep. So, it burnt to the ground. And then I'm like, okay, so, inventory, everything. I'm like, okay, I need a new forklift. They're like, okay, it's covered. I'm like, they're like, here's, $4,500 or whatever for what it's worth right now. But once you replace it, give us the receipt and we'll, so ended up, we rebuilt this building, for crazy money. Cause I mean, we started construction in 2021 when prices are just,
Oh, yeah.
crazy. Right. And they covered every dime of it, and ended up rebuilding a purpose built warehouse the way we wanted it to be, with
Mm,
brand new modern equipment. We got rid of all of the inventory that had been sitting there for 30 or 40 years and hadn't sold. So it really ended up being a blessing in disguise, because we did have another warehouse space, so we were still able to operate, and run the business. We just had to make some pivots, make some adjustments, and um, you know, now we have this amazing warehouse.
and
So
we just wanna reiterate, there was no foul play that was found on
there was
Jeremy.
no foul play. Correct. Yes. Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, sometimes insurance can work, in a good it's why you have it, right?
That's why you have it.
It
100%.
just the unfortunate thing is because we used to deal with these insurance companies is, like, someone would have a legitimate loss, and then they start to just be like, "Well, no, we can't pay for that. We can't pay for this. We can't pay for that." So,
And that was the amazing part about State Farm. They never argued with me once.
yeah.
The only discussion that we ever had was like about the building, and the cost to rebuild it. So that building was steel, and the one I'm sitting in right now is wood. And for whatever reason, the wood building was insured for like double what the steel one was.
Mm,
But my insurance agent had also done me another solid favor and had put an umbrella over both of them.
I see.
So when I rebuilt, I had the value of both buildings together, to go off of. So that was awesome. And they didn't drop me. I mean, it was $1 million payout, and they didn't drop me.
Wow.
So yeah,
Works
I
out.
was glad
But
about that.
that's all the you got all of the issues you could possibly go through starting a business. Lawsuit, fire burns down the building, pandemic. Anything
Yeah.
else that you added on?
No, I mean, I think that was probably enough, which is, crazy, because then in 2022 I started looking for another opportunity and found another store in Newark. One,
You're a maniac.
yes, that one I actually bought with no money of my own, which
Mm.
was
How
awesome.
did how did that transaction happen?
I actually ended up bringing on an investor. So the LED gas price sign company that I went to work for, where we were supposed to partner together to acquire, one of the owners, felt bad. I say felt bad, but like wished that I hadn't have left and wanted to really do something. And, saw me looking at this transaction that I really needed to do to mitigate some risks and so forth. Um, and he decided to come on board, with it. It was either him. I was trying to find money for that down payment piece, for the SBA portion. So he was willing to come on board. So I gave him 17% of the company.
Mm.
Um, and, and he came on board. And, I still remember the day that I was like debating this, and I'm in Vistage, peer group. And they're like, okay, before you make any decisions, you need to go home and ask your wife if she's okay with it.
Mhm.
So I went home. My wife was washing the dishes, and I said, Honey, how do you feel about us going like another $4 million in debt? And she like just stops and turns around, looks at me, and I'll never forget. She said, "You haven't lost the house yet." I'm like, "Okay, so is that a yes?" Yeah, and so, here we are a year later, and that transaction is done, and
That's good, much a lot bigger of a transaction.
it is. It was a much larger transaction. So obviously, Newark is a much larger city um, than London. The company itself was a little bit more than double the size
Mhm.
of the business, and it's also on 3 acres, but it had 122 storage units on the property.
I saw that in your notes that you bought some storage units. I guess I
Yep. So I bought the property, and along with that came the storage units and the building that the flooring store sits on.
they're just
Uh,
throwing in extra goodies on the side.
I know, right? Yeah, I mean, yeah, everybody's like, "Oh, storage units are kind of passive income," and that's not really true.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's funny, my ex-business partner, he was like, "We gotta get into storage units," and I'm like, "Why? Like, what?" He's like, "It's just so easy," and I'm like, Is it? I don't know."
it it can be. So when I first got it, we had like this little ledger book with everybody in it, and for 40 years they've been writing who paid rent when, and doing all this. So we got rid of that and went to a um, online system that controls everything, and we can put in and have recurring billing and automatically charge their credit cards every month and stuff. So that definitely simplified things quite a bit. But you still have to deal with, a conversation I had with a guy yesterday. He's $1,250 behind on rent,
Mm,
and is telling me his sob story about why he needs to get into his storage units to get stuff out from a deceased family member, and this and that. And it's like, and if they don't do that, then you have to post in a public publication that they haven't paid their rent and that you're putting it at an auction. Then you actually have to auction it off, and then if it doesn't sell at auction, you have to clean it out. And God forbid there's people living in any of them, which I've also run into,
nice.
which is fun. And the sheriff won't help you evict them because it's not an apartment.
Mm. How do you get rid of someone who's living in a storage unit then?
The only way that I got rid of her was she forgot to pay rent.
Oh, so just
So
like
I
one missed rent payment and you can
locked her out.
yeah, well, that's yeah, you don't have anywhere else to go, but
Right. Yep. So and then and then it was a conversation. It was okay. I'll open it up for you to get your stuff out, but you're done. You know.
you're right.
So yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, there's no easy businesses. Everyone's like, "Oh, the easy business." Like, I haven't if someone knows about it, tell me because I haven't found it yet.
No, I mean, I talk to business owners all the time, and there's not a single easy business out there, right? I mean, it's all ebbs and flows, and um, you know, as you're growing, we saw a tremendous amount of growth over the last couple of years. You know, growth is great, but the cash flow sucks, right? Especially you're doing $1 million projects for customers. I'm out the material cost and the labor cost way before I'm getting paid on that thing,
Yeah.
right? So it becomes very challenging.
What I tell young people is just look for the right industries. Just if find industries that are growing. Like, don't get into newspapers. That's probably
Right.
the wrong thing to get into. But
Yep.
if you get into AI or e-commerce or biotech or financial technology, like those are industries that are gonna keep on growing,
I,
and
I would
you're
also
not
say,
gonna run out of room.
get into service businesses are great too, right? Like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, flooring, roofing, plumbing, electrician, um, these are all great businesses that there are, baby boomers that own these companies, and most of them think that you know, their businesses are worth way more than they probably actually are. But AI isn't going to come in and install flooring, right?
No. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, there are skilled labor issues that you have to deal with and challenges and so forth, but there's that in every single industry, right? Um, but construction is not a bad business to get into if you have that passion. I would say find where your passion is and do that.
Most definitely.
Yeah,
The saying goes that do what, feels like, play to you, but work to others, because then you can go 16 hours a day and you just feel like you're playing.
yeah,
But to your point, yes, those service industries are picking up interest also from venture capitalists. Like a lot of these
100%.
VCs now are like, well, we can roll up 10 different roofing companies and have a roofing company that's doing $100 million in Greater Central Ohio, and then we can go sell that to, whatever, a supplier or Home Depot who wants to be able to do installs, all
Yep.
around the nation. So we have this entity. I was at a conference, the not the same conference I saw that guy, a conference before that, and we're in the gym working out, and we see this guy. He's like working out pretty hard. I was like, "Oh, what's up, man? Like, can I work in with this machine with you?" He's like, "Yeah, sure." So we get to talking. I was like, "What do you do?" And he's like, "Oh, I work for this like venture capital company." I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Tell me more." And he's like, "Yeah, we do like, various roll ups." And I was like, "Well, we're in Columbus, Ohio." He's like, "I was just in Columbus." I was like, "Yeah, what for?" He's like, "We're rolling up a roofing company there, like Lifetime Quality Roofing." And I was like, "I know those guys." Like,
Yeah. Roofing is really big with that. I got a buddy in Florida who just got his company got purchased by a VC. It was, I think his company was $100 million.
that's a big roofing company.
It is, and he rolled it up. But what they're doing is they kept him on board,
Yep.
and he got 10% of the larger entity. So then, as they continue to grow, and then
Right.
they get rolled up. Now he doesn't care about his original buyout of his $100 million company. That's peanuts compared to what the roll up is going to be 3 from now, right? That's where he's going to make most of his money.
That's really what these VCs try to do. They try to buy, let's call it 10 roofing companies to aggregate 3 or 400 million dollars. Because if they buy a company that's doing 2 million, maybe the value of that is like 3x EBITDA. So, whatever your earnings on 3 million bucks are, call it 300 grand, you can get 3x that. You can get 900 grand or something like that.
Yep.
But if they have $300 million in roofing, another company will say, we'll pay 12x EBITDA.
Yep.
So then you can just like automatically, essentially, like quadruple the value of your investment just by getting more volume, which makes total sense because like we have uh, bought and sold some small companies, and it's always the same amount of work. Like
Yeah.
whether it's a tiny little company or like a big company, you're like, this is always a lot of work. So that's been prevalent in our industry with like Amazon aggregators. They would start buying like anything. There was like this buying war for a while. And now they're like, we only want you if you're like a $3 or $5 million company, and we want to have like 2 or 3 of those a year. So they're not buying the little 30 grand's worth of business.
Yep. And I mean, that was part of my thought process in buying a second business a little bit was, let's do that, let's roll this up a little bit and be able to, use some of the things across the board. I'm not there yet. Not seeing that savings quite yet. But being able to have a store on either side of Columbus allows for us to be able to service, the majority of central Ohio with crews from either location, warehouse at either location. It really allows for us to be able to be more nimble.
So what's the idea? Is it to buy 2 or 3 or 4 more, or just kinda see where you're
I
going?
don't know. I mean, I've approached a couple of other guys, but one that I was talking to, it's I love the location, but like you start looking at these books, and it's a lifestyle company, right? Like the guy's owned it for 40 years. It's him and 2 other people that work there, and if you buy it, I'm buying a job, and I've already bought 2 jobs, right?
Mhm.
I don't need, so it's almost as much work, but probably easier to just add a satellite location, keep the
I see.
warehouses where they are, hire or move some employees to that location to scale it up, and probably scale that way. But before we do any of that, we're focused right now on let's get our SOPs in line, let's get our processes in place, let's get our systems in place, so that we have repeatable things that we can scale from. Because right now we're not there.
So maybe just talk to me about the difficulties of acquiring a business. So what are the things that you very quickly found to be, maybe harder than you thought they would be?
The whole transaction process is way harder than it has to be, in my
Then
opinion.
then it has to be. How so?
I just found like most businesses are not ready to be acquired. So in both instances,
That
uh,
it's the catch-22, right? If you're ready to be acquired, it's expensive.
right?
Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. If you know, if you're buying at the scale that I was, you're probably going to buy something whose books aren't exactly in line or clean. And, you know, at some point, I finally, you know, after I had to tell a broker, again, not Emmett, but the broker of the first company, like, the balance sheet needs to balance, right? Like, when I had that conversation, I was finally like, okay, I either am okay with this transaction or I'm not, but I can't trust
You got a
anything.
little like, a little adjustment, just like it just says adjustment for like 40 grand. You're like, "What is this?"
Right, exactly. So at some point, you're like, I just got to trust the tax returns, right? Because the tax returns are what, you know, are what it's going to be. Um, and just know that, you know, it becomes emotional at some point, on both sides. And trying to keep that out of it is key. And then the other thing is, like, when you're acquiring a business, you're acquiring the employees, and
Mm,
you're acquiring their customers, and both of those individuals have a culture and a way of doing business that they are used to.
mm,
And if that is not in alignment with who you are and what you want, it's way harder.
mm. Talk
So
about getting in and changing those cultural items.
yeah, it's tough. I mean, I'm lucky in that both of my acquisitions were fairly well aligned. But there were some that weren't, right? Like, and at that point it's just slowly trying to implement values and missions. So in both instances, neither company had values or a mission statement, or, you know, any of that. So I instituted my personal ones into the brands, and then slowly, like, began talking about them, and, you know, opening, you know, and making decisions based on them, because I feel like, you know, there's like decision making is a railroad track. On one side you have values, and on the other side you have financials, and as long as it's in between those things and it makes sense for both of those, then do whatever you want to, right?
Mm,
But if it's outside of either one of those things, then we need to have a conversation about
mm,
it.
okay.
And so, you know, it's slowly having those types of conversations and being transparent with people. I feel like the more that you state your intentions, what your intentions are and what they are not, before you have the conversations, it makes the conversation much easier. Like, you know, starting out by saying, hey, I like you. When we're done with this conversation, we're good. But we need to have a conversation, and I'm not trying to be a jerk or, you know, anything about it, but, you know, here's what we need to talk about.
Mm,
And I feel like that brings the guard down, and it sets the expectation for something that's going to be probably worse than it actually ends up being. And I found that helps. But at the end of the day, it's all about, for me, it's all about having conversations in a way that um, ends up positively impacting people and not tearing anybody down. If that makes sense.
makes total sense. Do you feel like you learned some of that in a call center?
I think I did learn some of that in a call center. I think I learned it from the opposite side of it to a certain degree. But I think that the coaching aspect of, like, coaching people every single day of every single week, there becomes a point where you know how to set that situation up. And I'm trying to think of the book. I think it's The Art of Coaching, maybe, by Bungie Stayer. I can't remember his name, but was a good one of just, like, setting things up, like setting up the conversation to allow for it to bring down people's guards, right? Like, it sounds
Mm,
completely awkward, but the more that you can take somebody from the defensive standpoint down, like, even just saying, like, I know that the conversation that we're about to have is going to be uncomfortable.
mhm,
It's going to be uncomfortable for you. It's going to be uncomfortable for me. My intention is to talk about whatever it is, and get it out on the table so that we can move on and move past this and be in a better situation than continuing to, you know, allow for it to fester on either person's side. I'm not mad at you. I'm not, anything. It's just something we need to talk about.
mm. Yeah, I've heard that a good, like, kinda intro phrase is, like, "You're gonna be really, really mad at me for this." But then, like, they're, like, prepped, like, "Oh gosh, this is gonna be terrible," but then you kinda deliver a little bit less. They're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's bad." Like,
Yeah.
even if previously when you wouldn't have said that, they'd be like, "Oh, I am frustrated at Alex. I can't believe he said that." But
Yeah.
because you, like, soft introed it to them, then they feel a lot better. One that I really love, and I got this from Ted Lasso. He's like, "Hey, are you the type of person who if you have something stuck in your teeth, you want me to tell you?" "Yeah." "Yeah, okay. Well, here's what's going on." And it's like, everybody knows this is going on. I just wanna be the person who actually tells you this.
Yeah, that's a
So
good one too, for
I
sure.
before we go into reviews, I say like, "Hey, look, we're the type of company, if you have something stuck in your teeth, we care enough about you to say something and not so much that we say nothing.
Yeah.
So, we wanna get this out in front of you, the things that we want you to try to work on." It's funny because you hit on 2 of my 3 big leadership tenets. The firefighter that I had, he's got a book like, Forged in the Fire of Leadership, something like that. Um, he has almost the same 3. I had 2 and he hit on those exact 2. He added 1 and I'm like, "Yeah, I love that." The first one that you hit on is like building comfort with your people, like building a relationship, and it seems like you clearly did that. You were able to come in and prove to them, like, "I care about you. You are not just part of my huge capitalistic organization of my 50 other flooring companies. And like, if you don't want to work here, we'll get somebody. It's fine." You prove to them by spending time with them and like getting down into the trenches with them, like, I care. And
Yeah.
when you can do that, then people go, well, Jeremy cares about me. So I know this feedback that he's giving me. It's not because he doesn't care. It's because he actually does care. That was the first one. The second one you hit on was transparency, just like being straightforward with people. Kind of again hitting on that what I said. If you have something in your teeth, we want to tell you. We don't want to like avoid it. And also, we're going to be very clear with you. I just had to have a meeting today with one of my employees. Unfortunately, they're really bad on their attendance repertoire over the last 60 days. And I just told them, like, if you miss another day in the next month, you're going to be terminated. I just want to be very clear with you. Like, I don't want you to be surprised if you call me on Monday and you're like, I cannot come in. I am going to terminate you. So, like,
Yep.
this is not like I'm not threatening you. I just want you to be like totally understanding that there is no like ifs, ands, or buts about this. That's what's going to occur. And I think people just want that. And I tell people this all the time. We try to be very clear with you, like what success looks like at the company on your first day. You see the 2-week review. You see what we're going to tell you in 2 weeks. On the 2-week review, we show you what we're going to talk about at 2 months. The 2-month review, we tell you what we're going to talk about every 6 months. So we try to just create a very clear path.
Yeah.
The, the, I'll just hammer the third one home real fast. The last one is just consistency. You got to try to treat everybody the same way. There can't be rules for Jeremy because he's the owner that nobody else has to follow. Like, well, Jeremy gets to come in at 11 a.m. because he's the owner, but I have to come in at 8. People will just get so mad at that. They don't want rules for thee, but not for we, kind of thing.
Yeah, I know, and that's one that I struggle with, because I feel guilty when I have to leave, right? So, like, part of me buying and owning my companies was like, for my wife, I was like, when things come up with the kids, I'm going to take care of it, right? Like, I'm going to. So there's times where I'm like, man, I feel like I'm taking an awful lot of time off to take care of the kids or to get like my daughter to swim practice or to whatever. um but ultimately, if somebody needs to leave because they need to take care of something, that's fine. It's when it becomes abusive or another situation that we have a problem, which is why we have an unlimited PTO policy. If you need to take time
Mm.
off, take time off. I'm not here to babysit you. I'm not here to do anything. But if it becomes a um regular reoccurring like abusive situation, then we're going to address that behavior aspect of it and not punish you for wanting to take off. I found that doing that, my employees probably take less time off than they do if I
I
gave them
was
3 weeks.
I was gonna ask because I think that's what studies indicate is that unlimited PTO, people like feel like quote unquote guilty. I'm not telling you to change your policy. I'm sure if you changed it, people would probably be upset, even if they actually get to use more. Um,
Yeah.
but people feel like guilty taking it because they're like, "Oh gosh, I just feel like I'm taking so much."
Yeah, and I mean, and we don't talk about it very much. It's just like if you need to take off, right? Like, I just ask that you plan it, when you can, like,
Mhm.
and when I have to take care of my daughter, it's like, okay, this week I have to leave early these days to go take care of this situation, right? Like, but I'm also there at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, just like everybody else is, right?
Here's what we did to kind of alleviate that, because like I said, we got 35 people, so everybody sees it if the owner comes in at 11, and
Yeah.
you're just like gonna get people who are like chattering like, well, why does Alex get to come in at 11? So I
Yep.
like my hours are 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, same standard that I hold everyone else to. My business partner, he's like, I want to come in earlier. I'm like, cool. Let's just go into the handbook and we'll write it in that once you get to 5 years, then you can start at 8 and leave at 4. And
Yeah.
once you get to 10 years, you can like go 7 to 3 if you want. But we just set the rules up. I know this is people are gonna be like, you're just setting the rules up to benefit you. No, I'm setting the rules up so that they apply to me. But then anybody else who hits those same metrics, they'll
Yeah.
also have the access. So it's again, it's not everyone has the exact same rules, but the handbook is written so that if you meet the criteria, you are able to access it. And
Yeah.
then we just say, like, we're going to stick to this. And if at the end of the calendar year, we're like, hey, there's not enough PTO. I've been here 10 years and I just don't feel like there's enough PTO. It's like, okay, at that point, we can change it, but we're going to try to stick to it while we're in there. What I have found people get frustrated by is if there is a rule, but you don't stick to it.
Yes.
Or people also get frustrated when there's no rule and then people can like interpret like this person's breaking the rule. And you're like, well, it's not really written anywhere. It's like, well, I just feel like it should be. They should know that they can't do that. It's like, all right, now you got to go into the handbook and write something up. And I know people go, well, it's silly. You shouldn't have to have every single thing documented in a handbook. And this is how handbooks get along because you've been in business for
Yeah.
15 years and all sorts of little things pop up. Like, I didn't think that I needed to tell anyone they can't smoke weed in the parking lot, but they're like, well, I didn't smoke it in the building. It's like, I guess we got to include that in the handbook, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of all of the things that we used to have to deal with in the call center space, right? Like,
Oh, I believe it. I believe you're getting some, not to say rough people, but some entry level folks.
yeah, and it wasn't even that. It's just like different, right? Like everybody, yeah, everybody was a little bit different. And I'm obviously a much smaller company at this point than any of that. So, luckily, we haven't run into too much of that. But we definitely try to be very consistent with the way that we handle and treat everybody, and treat myself as well. So,
Yeah, consistency, transparency, and then just like building that relationship and rapport with your employees. If you can do those three things, honestly, you're gonna be like a pretty damn good manager. Like
yeah,
you don't need to do any other special bells and whistles, no, holding hands, back patting, things like that. You're gonna be pretty much on it if you can do that. That's gonna get you 90% of the way there.
100%. And I think if you're transparent, you're able to then get your employees and your team to be transparent. It kind of all rolls downhill.
Mm. Well, Jeremy, I want to transition a little bit because you told me before the podcast this is your 1 year anniversary. So congratulations, my guy.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. 1 year of outdoor 5K, at least a 5K a day. So a year ago tomorrow, I started on that walking 5K. Was probably, you know, 40 or 50 pounds heavier than I am today. And
I saw the pictures that you posted on LinkedIn.
yeah, yeah. So now I'm, this morning I ran for 6 miles and probably similar time that I did the 5K or the 3.1 miles. Actually, I did a 10K today, so double what I normally do. But yeah, it's been fun and interesting. And I don't know if you know the name Trevor Cowie, but he runs an organization called the Real Business Owners, and Mastermind, and they have a podcast and whatnot. And
Mm.
I remember seeing him at his event last year, and one of the things he kind of got up and said was, "Okay, everybody, raise your hand if you worked out today." Right. So, like, most bros in there are, raising their hands and all that. And he's like, "Okay, how many of you did it outdoors?" Everybody raised it. And he's like, "Okay, how many of you done it for outdoors for 60 days?" And then, he gets 75. He's like, "Okay, now that we're done with the 75 hard people, like, keep going." And he gets up there. He's like, "Okay, now raise your hand if you have done an outdoor workout for at least a 5K for 600 days." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm the only one." He's like, "I like to do things that give me the confidence that when I walk in a room, I know that I am one of one or one of few
Mm.
to have done something. So that's why I did this." And his whole thing started when he was watching Goggins speak
Oh, yeah.
um, at an event. And he's like sitting there next to a guy and he's like listening to Goggins speak. And he's like, "Why are we listening to this dude like talk about doing it when we can just go outside and do it?" You know? And so now I know when I walk into a room, I'm going to be one of one or one of few people who have done an outdoor 5K for 366 days. Right.
Mhm.
And so it gives me a sense of discipline and confidence that I didn't have a year ago, that I didn't have, a few months ago, to know that there's something that sets me apart from the majority of people in that room. Yes, when I walk into a room, there are people who are more successful than me. Yes, there are people who probably have better relationships than me, but there's not very many people that have had the discipline to go outside and, what feels like -10-degree weather in Dallas, Texas, with ice on the ground,
Mhm.
and walk for 3.2, 3.1 miles.
Mm. How has it been building that habit?
So it started out and a year ago, I started a year ago on the year, but before that, I think I got up to like 80 days. And then I was like at the beach on vacation, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna do this barefoot, and I twisted my ankle.
Mm.
And then I didn't do it. And the next morning I woke up and I'm like, man, I'll just let my inner demon, right? My inner voice, which I call Smitty. I just let him win.
Is that the one that tells you, like, "Don't do that, eat the
Yeah,
donut"?
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
read any Stephen Pressfield?
No.
You probably like this book, The War of Art.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah. Actually, I have read that book.
there's
Yes.
the art of war, and then
Yep.
there's the war of
The
art.
War
But
of Art.
basically,
Yeah.
he calls this the resistance. He's like, the resistance is that voice inside of you that's like, don't do that. Like, don't work out. That's gonna suck. We're not gonna like that. But
Yep.
no, don't eat that chicken breast and rice. Like, order pizza. You know?
Right.
For
Yep.
him, it's most like sit down, write for 4 hours. But he's like, that's the resistance. He's like, the thing of it is the resistance never goes away. People are dreaming that someday the resistance goes away. Even Goggins talks about that. Like some
Yep.
days I just don't want to run. I just look at my shoes for like 20, 30 minutes, like this is gonna suck.
Yep.
And it's
Yeah.
all about getting over that, and he calls it feeding the muse, more of like an artistic thing. He's like, "You're feeding the muse what it wants." And he says that all these people believe that art happens when you get inspiration and you something just hits you out of a flash and you are salsa dancing, but now you need to walk back to your apartment so that you can write. And he's like, "That's not how it works in my experience." He's like, "You get inspiration by sitting down every day and writing and feeding the muse." And he talks about, and I don't know how much he believes this or if this is like an ethereal thing, but he says that when you feed the muse, like you beat the resistance, it gives you like inspiration. It sort of like it's almost like a divine thing in Pressfield's mind. So
Yeah, I would agree
take
with
that
that.
for what you will, but
No, I mean, it's definitely there every day, right? Like I usually wake up every morning at 4 o'clock. I'm not saying that people should wake up at 4 o'clock. I'm not saying, everybody's routine is their own routine and you do what, when it's best for you. But for me, it's early in the morning. But this morning I woke up at like 3:40. I was just up. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm gonna get a better start on my 5K, on my miles. I'm like, man, I really have now like an extra 20 minutes. Maybe I can get an extra couple miles in. And then I like go downstairs and I'm like, get my shoes on. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, I'm like on Facebook and, Instagram. And I'm like, man, it's now 4:20, which is the
yeah.
time I normally walk out the door to start this thing. I'm like, what am I doing? So yes, you're right. It never goes away, but I'm way better at winning that battle
Mhm.
today than I was a year ago. Right. Like a year ago, and even at points in between, there would be times where like, I would be like, and my wife would hear me stirring, and she's like, "You're gonna regret it if you don't go do it right now." So I'm like, okay, I'm getting up and doing it. There's been times where I haven't done it, and my son comes downstairs every morning now, and his first question to me, he's 4 years old, about to be 5, and his first question every morning is, "Did you do your 5 miles yet? Did you do your 5 miles?" And so I know if I don't go and do that, I've got to answer him no.
Mm.
Right? Or I have to go and do it later, which is going to suck at 10 o'clock at night, trying to go out and be like, dang, I got to go run, at least because now I'm running 5 miles a day for the last 90 days. So I'm like, I have to
Mhm.
go out and do at least 5 miles at 10 o'clock tonight. And then again, less than 12 hours from now, I have to get up and do 5 more miles. you know?
Mm. Yeah.
Uh, and so it's way easier, but yeah, it never goes away, right? Like I'm, it has never been like I'm super motivated to go do this. Like that has never really been the case for me. But now I'm disciplined to do it. I post it every day on Facebook.
Nice.
People know that I'm going to post it on Facebook.
That's
Yeah,
another the social proof, right?
absolutely. Yep. And there's been times where I'm like, you know what? I'm going to stop posting this. Like there's even like yesterday or the day before, I was like, you know what? I could make the decision today to just stop, and that's kind of a win. But I'm like, there are plenty of people that send me things and just say, "Hey, thank you for sending that. It motivates me to do this." And as long as I'm changing or affecting the way that one person feels about it, and if there's one person that'll get up and go outside and move their body and sweat because they see me doing it, then I have to show it and I have to do it.
Mm. How easy is it once you miss a day though? Like you said, you twisted that ankle. Is it just to be like, it's over? Like that's how I have a streak going. It's not nearly as impressive. I've missed 4 days this year, and I know that because I have a little light up calendar, so I can click it. And I just forgot. It's not even like I consciously made the decision, like I'm not going to do this today. It's to read every day, walk a mile every day, and stretch every day. And there's a couple days I just like forgot to read. Literally, I woke up the following morning and I was like, I'm pretty sure I didn't read yesterday at all. Uh,
That's one of the hardest ones. Like when I was doing 75 or hard earlier this year, like the reading was like always the one that I'm like, oh, all right, let me get up out of bed and go do this real quick.
yeah, yeah, I would just those, like, multiple days I just forgot. One day I was at an expo and I was tied up with clients, and it's like, no excuses, you can get it done, but basically, I've just, like, missed it only because I forgot to do it, not because I consciously decided not to. But when I missed that 1 or 2 days, you kinda just the next day, you're just like, maybe I just, like, won't even do it today." And you're like, "Why
100%.
am I thinking this?" Like, well, you're
Yeah.
like, the streak's over, so it's like, it doesn't really even matter. You've decided to miss a day, so whether you miss 1 day this year or 2 days, like, what's the difference? And you just gotta, like, stop yourself and be like, What is where is this voice coming from that's telling me I don't need to do it?" And you realize, like, specifically when it comes to fitness, and you could speak to this more than myself, but especially when you're heavy, like, if you're really having a tough time getting out and exercising, if you, like, miss a day, like, how easy it would be to just backslide and be like, we'll just not work out today. We'll just, like, get back to the pizza. We'll do tomorrow, and then tomorrow turns to, like,
It's
later this
amazing how
week.
quickly that goes, right? Like, I was doing a really good job, like watching what I ate and all of this stuff. And then I went on vacation and it was like, they compound, oh, we'll get ice
Yeah.
cream, but at some point it's like, you know what? No, I'm getting back on the horse. And the social proof too. Like I, I'm begun to track. I'm on like day 2 of like putting all my macros and stuff into my fitness pal, and then I shoot it to my coach,
Mm.
right? Like we shoot ourselves our workouts in the morning, and then I share my macros in the evenings. But he missed a day last year, so he's on like day 522 or 550. I can't remember. Um, but last year he missed a day when his dad passed of doing his 5K. And
Mm.
he's like, you know what? I'm not going to beat myself up, but I am going to make it up. Right. So he just made it up and then counted that as, good for the year. And, God bless him. And, I get it. The grace is there. Right.
Yeah.
Um, but, once you get it going, it becomes something you just got to keep going to a certain level. Trevor, the guy I was talking about, he's focused on getting to 1,000 days, which for him will be in September. But now he's doing 10 miles a day. And so his is 1,000 days of two workouts, one being outside.
Mm. It's a lot. That's a lot of volume.
It is. And his outside now is at least 10 miles a day.
So
Right.
that's a lot of your day.
It's an hour and a half for
Yeah.
him.
Well,
Yeah.
probably the run, right?
Yeah. Yeah. An hour and a half for the run. Correct. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
he's got his other workout,
He's got his other strength workout. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Hey, I'm a maniac. I have all sorts of, like, crazy physical challenges and things that I have done and continue to do, so I'm not gonna critique anybody who's out there,
Yeah.
putting in effort. I love it.
Yeah, no, they're crazy. But my other coach is doing a 5K per day. So each day, the amount that you do increases. So like today's the 9th. So he's doing the 9K. Tomorrow's 10th. So he'll do a 10K. So like by the end of the month, he'll be doing a 30K or 31K. right? Which is fifth or is what
I was just thinking of that.
18
Well,
miles.
yeah, somewhere in that radius.
Yeah. So I
Um,
think it ends up that he's doing 300K over the course of the month or something like that.
mhm.
Uh, which is yeah,
Dude, I
yeah,
played soccer in college. I'm, like, runned out. Like, when I was done with, like, soccer, I was just like, "I wanna lift." Like, I wanna, like, gain mass, which that
right, yeah,
was holding me back. No, it turns out, like, I'm 6 foot tall, like 170 pounds. It's just like that's what's holding me back, not
yeah.
the soccer aspect, but, we still get in there and we give it hell as best as we can. What was it like losing the weight? Because I know you said you lost, what, 80 pounds, something like
Yeah,
that?
I'm down about 80 pounds. So that one, my aunt like reached out to me. So that would have been like around Christmas, November, Christmas time of 22. And she's like, "Hey, I've been doing this Optavia thing, and it's really helped me lose weight. It's like it's basically like a nutrition. Like you take this drink, and then you have two greens and a full meal, and whatever." And I like looked into it, I'm like, I'm not going to pay somebody $600 a month to give me the food I need. I'm like, I'm going to try to do this on my own first.
Right. There's no it's funny because I was looking at your, I think it was your LinkedIn, and you posted something about that, and the first comment was like, "Amazing. What's your secret?" And I was just
It's
like,
not really a secret.
people don't, like, understand the secret is, like, you gotta consume fewer calories than you expend. Like, there is
That's
there
it.
is no secret.
Yep.
And a lot of people like, I had another guy in my office, and I'm, like, real into this, so maybe, like, what's common knowledge to you and I now at this point in time is not common knowledge to other people,
Right.
but I had a guy in my office that he's a big guy. He goes, "Yeah, I just, like me and my dad, we both just, like, gain weight over the summer. It's just, like, something with, like, the season," and I'm like, "No, that's not how the body works." Like,
It's called rib season.
unless you have some crazy, like, thyroid thing that somehow is affected with vitamin D, like, which I find to be extremely unlikely,
Yep.
you are consuming more calories in the summer historically than you're consuming in the winter. Like, that's the only possible explanation for this, brother. Like, and the joke that this guy that I really like, Justin Harris, makes. He's like, people will say, like, well, no, calories in, calories out don't work for me. And he's like, that's actually amazing. That's great because all we need to do is sit you in a room and we'll feed you 2,000 calories and then you'll burn 2,500 calories. And we'll take those 500 calories in heat energy and then we'll use those to like power the planet. And then those excess, 500 calories are going to heat something. And if we can get more people like you, if we can study you and put them into a room, now we can like just we have unlimited energy. And he's like, it's a joke, obviously, because that's like not how physics works. Like
Yeah.
there's always the conservation of the energy somewhere along the chain. So he's like, you're probably just not tracking your sauces or your mayonnaise or your ranch, or you don't understand, like, oh wow, there's just a ton of calories in these drinks that I'm drinking or donuts or whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's always something out there that you're consuming more calories than you're expending.
Yeah, it was interesting. So through Vistage, we have speakers that come in, and Luke Carlson came in. He's a former like weight and strength trainer for the NFL in the NFL, and he was talking about one of the studies was doing a double blind study of people running and people not running, and then switching them, right? And because people are always like, oh, if you run, runners are always skinny because they're expending more calories. Well, in reality, the group that ran ended up consuming more calories because they felt like because they ran, they were allowed to do that and they didn't
Yes.
lose any more weight than the group who just didn't do anything. And then when they switched and the group that wasn't running started running, they did the exact same thing, right? So like people feel like when you are running and consuming these calories, that all of a sudden it gives you a increased amount of calories that you can eat, which is not exactly the case if you want to lose weight.
One of my favorite, like, diet coaches, he says that he's like, "I stopped doing, like, heavy deadlifts and heavy squats and, like, these heavy, like, compound movements, and I went to 2 days a week, just strength training." He's like, "I would go hard, but I wasn't doing those compound movements. The rest of the days, I was just walking." He's like, "I got into the best shape of my life because I can actually hit my calories, and I'm not, like, starved at all times a day because 'cause I'm, like, doing rounds on the bag boxing and hitting the assault bike, and I'm, doing my Metcons and CrossFit WODs, and I'm doing my barbell thrusters." He's like, "You just get so hungry when you're doing
Yeah.
all that work that it's just way harder to stick to your, like, 2,300 calories a day diet than if you're just like, I'm just like going to gently exercise, go hard on my lift days, but I do it 2 days a week. And I've done that more some similar to that myself. And I'm like, that makes a ton of sense. Like it
It's
actually
funny.
does legitimately work if you're tracking your calories,
Right.
Uh,
It's funny because Luke also said that he owns a couple of fitness gyms in the Minneapolis area, and one of the things he said was he only allows his people in the gym to lift 2 days a week. He's like, because your body needs the extra time in between to actually it builds more muscle when you have those 2 rest days in there, right? Go hard and lift slow and all of that, but that's the best way to gain strength. So I don't know.
were
I
you
just try to move my body and try to not eat crazy, and
Yeah.
you know
Were you not tracking your calories then throughout that kinda 80
I
calorie
was not.
day,
No,
pound?
no, I was just. I mean, I was conscious of it, right? And I switched from more of a kind of eating whatever. At the same time, I found out I had a gluten sensitivity, which probably also helped with reduction of carbohydrates to a certain degree.
Mhm.
Um, but I switched to a higher protein diet. I did that on purpose. But that was really the only conscious decision that I made from a eating perspective.
Mm,
But ultimately, if I ate the same amount as I did when I weighed 300 pounds, but I went outside for an hour and moved my body,
right,
I'm going to burn more calories and thus I'm going to lose weight.
right.
Yeah.
Well, how do you think it's, made you a better business owner, more thoughtful?
I think that I'm beginning to translate the small, consistent aspect of discipline into my business,
Mm,
to try to help that. I think more where it's helped my business is my employees seeing me be disciplined about my health translates into them feeling like I care more in general about
mm,
life, and the impact that I'm having. And my mood is better. I'm more conscious about how I'm treating people, etc. And I think all of that comes from, again, being outside in nature in the morning. I listen to a podcast for a little while. I pray, and then the rest of the time, I just kind of observe the beauty of God's world and watching it wake up in the morning. Right, I get to see bunny rabbits try to jump over my head. Sometimes I get to see
hmm,
deer 2 feet away. I get to see skunks and start to run away from me and just pray that they don't spray as they're running away. Right. I've seen some really cool and amazing things during that time that just like make me realize that I'm so insignificant in this world, but at the same time, so powerful in my ability to affect my world.
mm. Well, there's also legit science around, getting sunlight into your eyes first thing in the morning. I don't know if this is, something that you've caught before, but I had a buddy, I've told this story before, but I had a buddy who was into sun gazing, and I'm like, "Okay, like, what could that possibly be?" He's like the guy who's, like, always got, like, kinda the goofy, like, things going
The
on.
woo woo,
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I'm okay with, like, a little bit,
Oh,
I'll
absolutely.
I'll
Yeah.
accept a little bit, like, if it and what I find is it's funny, sometimes you'll hear, like, these woo-woo things, and you'll be like, "That sounds like bullshit," and then later down the line, there's, like, actually some science that sort of backs it up, not, like, totally, like, doesn't,
Right.
like it's like, "Yes, crystals will absolutely, like, heal your Alzheimer's," like, okay, well, we're not gonna go that far, but every once in a while you do hear something, it's like, yeah, this has like a frequency and that frequency is good for like DNA repair. And it's like, okay, well, there's something there too. So he was into sun gazing, like it's probably like 10 years ago. And I'm like, what could that possibly be? And he's like, yeah. So I just like, I try to wake up before the sun and then I just try to get like I basically just like watch the sun rise. And then at night I try to watch the sun set. And I like try not to have any lights on in the house after that. So you like are training your circadian rhythm. And I was like, okay, well maybe it's like good for sleep. Lo and behold, Andrew Huberman, I'm listening to a podcast with him, and he says one of the best ways to get rid of cortisol in the morning, because cortisol is your wake up hormone, but we also
Yep.
know it as the stress hormone, right? One of the best things you can do is get sunlight directly into your eyes. He's like, it's not the same as getting it onto your skin. He's like, you want to look into the sun, low level sun, or you want to have it obstructed through something like looking through a bush, looking through trees, something like that. And actually, the sunlight entering your eyes helps convert cortisol into testosterone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it, like, gives you this, like literally, you start your day, like, by getting rid of your stress hormone and pumping your body up with, like, the go get it hormone,
Yeah.
and this is, like, sound real science, so I'm like I'd listen to that, I was like, "Holy shit, my buddy talking about sun gazing, like, had it figured out," and this is actually legit, so
Yeah.
and they know exercising outside, I'm sure, as you also would attribute, is just better for your body. There's more mood uplifting. I don't know if there's anything associated with like actually burning more calories, but I totally believe that
Yeah, I
there's
think it
something
stimulates
there.
your mood for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, well, Jeremy, man, I appreciate it. You got anything else that I didn't cover? I mean, we covered, burnt down buildings, COVID, lawsuits, losing 80
Yeah.
pounds, 5Ks, managing
Yeah.
people, the gambit, brother.
Yeah, no, we covered a lot, and I appreciate the opportunity for you having me on. It's not easy to churn out a podcast, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on here and spread my message and what you're doing. So I appreciate it.
I know we're close by. You'll have to come down to the facility. I don't know if,
Absolutely.
I said, but we're building a new facility. We'd love to have you at the old one, but, now it's getting to be like, "Oh, the BMW? No, wait until we get the Maserati in. Just wait. It's gonna be amazing."
All right. No, absolutely. I'll have to stop by and check it out.
We'd love to have you down, man. All right, Jeremy, thank you, man.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you.
Yep. Appreciate